tail club weighing over 100 pounds, swinging at speeds up to 35 miles per hour, generating 800 pounds of force, enough to shatter a car windshield. That's the devastating weapon system attached to every Ankylosaurus, and new evidence shows they used it regularly. The Zulcruivastata fossil reveals battle damage that proves these statistics weren't theoretical, they were battlefield reality. When paleontologists calculated the impact forces, they realized these armored dinosaurs were carrying around biological sledgehammers that could break bones with a single strike. A single fossil discovery in Montana changed everything we thought we knew about armored dinosaurs, and the evidence was written in scars across its flanks. In the Judith River Formation, paleontologists uncovered something extraordinary that would shake the foundations of ankylosaur research. The specimen they found wasn't just another fossil, it was Zulcruivastata, named after the terrifying monster from Ghostbusters, and it preserved details that most dinosaur fossils simply don't retain. This wasn't your typical collection of scattered bones that paleontologists usually piece together like an ancient jigsaw puzzle. Zul came with its skin intact, along with the complete array of bony armor plates that covered its back and sides. The level of preservation was remarkable, offering scientists their first detailed look at how these defensive structures actually appeared on a living animal. Most ankylosaur fossils consist of isolated armor plates and partial skeletons, but Zul presented researchers with a nearly complete picture of ankylosaur anatomy from nose to tail. The real shock came when researchers examined the armor plating along Zul's flanks. Several of the bony spikes near the hip region showed clear signs of damage that didn't fit any known pattern of predator attacks or accidental injuries. These weren't the jagged tears you'd expect from a Tyrannosaurus rex's serrated teeth, nor were they the kind of random breaks that happen when bones fossilize over millions of years. Instead, the damage showed blunted, rounded patterns that suggested repeated impacts from a very specific type of object. Forensic analysis revealed something that changed how we understand ankylosaur behavior entirely. The spacing between the damaged areas matched exactly with the dimensions of ankylosaur tail clubs. The depth of the impacts aligned perfectly with the force that these biological weapons could generate. When researchers measured the distance between strike marks, they found consistent spacing that ruled out random predator attacks or environmental damage. The pattern was too precise, too systematic to be anything other than deliberate combat. What made this discovery even more significant was the evidence of healing around the damaged sites. The bone had grown back around the impact points, creating rounded, blunted edges that told a story of survival. These weren't fatal wounds, but battle scars that Zul had lived with for months or even years. The healing patterns indicated that this particular ankylosaur had endured multiple encounters with its own species, each time surviving the devastating blows from tail clubs that could shatter bones. This single fossil overturned decades of scientific assumptions about ankylosaur social behavior. For generations, paleontologists had pictured these creatures as solitary, peaceful herbivores that used their armor purely for defense against predators. The idea that they might fight each other with their formidable weapons had never seriously been considered. Zul's scarred flanks proved that ankylosaurs engaged in brutal, territorial battles with members of their own species, transforming our understanding of their social structure. The implications became even more startling when researchers discovered that Zul wasn't an isolated case. Examination of other ankylosaur specimens revealed similar damage patterns on armor plates from different species across multiple geological formations. This wasn't a one-time incident, but evidence of widespread intraspecific combat throughout ankylosaur evolution. These heavily armored dinosaurs weren't the passive plant eaters that scientists had imagined. They were aggressive fighters, willing to battle their own kind with weapons capable of inflicting serious damage. Understanding their fighting behavior requires examining the weapon that caused this damage, their devastating tail club. The ankylosaur tail wasn't just a weapon, it was a masterpiece of biological engineering that could generate forces capable of shattering the strongest bones in the animal kingdom. When you examine the anatomy of this devastating appendage, what emerges is a structure so perfectly designed for delivering maximum impact that it seems almost too efficient to be real. The tail club represented millions of years of evolutionary refinement, creating what amounts to a biological battering ram that could change the outcome of any prehistoric encounter. The foundation of this weapon began with the distal caudal vertebrae, which underwent a remarkable transformation during ankylosaur evolution. These vertebrae progressively widened and eventually fused together into a single rigid unit that paleontologists refer to as the handle. This wasn't a gradual fusion that happened during the animal's lifetime. It was a developmental process that created an inflexible rod of bone specifically engineered to transfer maximum force. The handle extended for several feet behind the hips, providing the leverage needed to generate devastating swing speeds. At the terminal end of this handle, massive osteoderms formed the striking surface of the club. These weren't simple bony plates, but large keeled structures that initially developed as separate elements before fusing into the bulbous mass that crowned the weapon. The osteoderms were arranged in a specific pattern that distributed the impact force across multiple contact points while maintaining the structural integrity needed to withstand repeated collisions with other dinosaurs. Most researchers assumed that carrying such a heavy weapon would slow these animals down, but the opposite turned out to be true. Ossified tendons ran along the length of the tail, creating a network of reinforcement that actually increased striking power rather than limiting it. These tendons worked like steel cables in a suspension bridge, preventing the tail from flexing during a swing and ensuring that every ounce of kinetic energy reached the target. The rigid structure meant that when an ankylosaur initiated a tail swing, the entire momentum of the animal's body weight transferred directly to the club head. Biomechanical analysis revealed just how devastating this weapon could be in practice. The bone density of the club head reached levels comparable to the hardest materials found in the animal kingdom. Individual clubs could weigh over 100 pounds, creating a concentrated mass at the end of a flexible lever arm. When computer models calculated the forces involved, the results were staggering. These biological weapons could generate impact forces equivalent to a medieval war hammer swung by a giant. The swing speeds achieved by ankylosaurs defied expectations for such heavily built animals. Digital simulations showed that the clubs could reach velocities of over 40 miles per hour at impact. The combination of mass velocity and the rigid handle structure meant that each swing delivered thousands of pounds of force concentrated into a small contact area. This level of impact energy was more than sufficient to crack the femur of even the largest predatory dinosaurs. The fused vertebrae and ossified tendons created a rigid structure that channeled all kinetic energy into a concentrated impact point, transforming the tail into a bone-shattering weapon that could disable any attacker with a single well-placed blow. The tail club represented one of the most effective weapons in dinosaur evolution, specifically designed for maximum destructive force through millions of years of natural selection. Understanding the true power of this weapon requires examining what happened when ankylosaurs stood their ground against the most fearsome predators of their time. Deep in the fossil record lies evidence of a confrontation so brutal that it left broken teeth and shattered bones as testimony to one of prehistory's most epic battles. The Late Cretaceous period, spanning from 70 to 66 million years ago, created the perfect conditions for what might have been the most intense predator-prey encounters in Earth's history. During this final chapter of the dinosaur age, North America housed both Tyrannosaurus rex and Ankylosaurus in the same ecosystems, making direct confrontations not just possible but inevitable. The geographic overlap between these species was extensive across what is now Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. Both dinosaurs roamed the same river plains and forested environments, competing for territory and resources. T-Rex dominated as the apex predator, while Ankylosaurus represented the ultimate in defensive evolution. Their shared habitat meant that sooner or later these titans would face off in battles that would test the limits of both predatory power and defensive capability. When you compare the weaponry each species brought to these encounters, it becomes clear that neither held an overwhelming advantage. T-Rex possessed a bite force of 17,000 pounds per square inch, capable of crushing the bones of almost any animal that walked the earth. Its massive skull housed teeth up to 12 inches long, designed specifically for penetrating flesh and bone. This crushing power represented millions of years of evolution focused on creating the perfect killing machine. Ankylosaurus countered this overwhelming bite force with armor capable of absorbing impacts equivalent to high-speed car crashes. The bony plates covering its back and sides weren't just passive protection, they were engineered to distribute and dissipate tremendous amounts of kinetic energy. Laboratory tests showed that this biological armor could withstand forces that would crush the bones of most other dinosaurs, creating an almost impenetrable defensive barrier. The fossil evidence reveals just how intense these battles became. Paleontologists have discovered broken T-Rex teeth near ankylosaur remains, suggesting failed predation attempts where the predator's weapons shattered against superior armor. These weren't clean kills, but desperate struggles where even the most powerful predator couldn't guarantee victory. The broken teeth tell a story of repeated attempts to penetrate defenses that simply wouldn't yield to conventional predatory tactics. Biomechanical modeling calculated the exact parameters needed for an ankylosaur tail strike to disable its massive opponent. The research revealed that these biological weapons could generate forces exceeding 400-800 pounds at impact, delivered through a concentrated striking surface, moving at speeds up to 40 miles per hour. This level of force was more than sufficient to fracture a T-Rex femur, potentially crippling the predator and ending the confrontation immediately. Recent posture analysis completely changed how scientists understand ankylosaur combat capabilities. Rather than being low-slung creatures that hugged the ground, these armored dinosaurs stood upright like modern rhinoceros, positioning their bodies to maximize tail swing efficiency. This upright stance allowed for devastating lateral strikes that could catch attacking predators off guard, transforming what appeared to be a defensive posture into an offensive advantage. Any confrontation between these species would have been a tactical engagement where each participant possessed lethal capabilities and critical vulnerabilities. T-Rex held advantage in speed and agility, while Ankylosaurus dominated through armor and weaponry. Computer models show that victory would have depended on positioning timing and which animal could exploit the other's weaknesses first. This evidence reveals that ankylosaurs weren't just survivors, they were apex defenders in their own right.
4,
5.
Ankylosaurus represents the ultimate evolution of defensive and offensive capabilities, fundamentally transforming our understanding of late Cretaceous ecosystems. These weren't simple herbivores waiting to become prey. They were tactical fighters equipped with biological weapons that could disable the largest predators. This research changes our perception of prehistoric life from basic predator-prey relationships to complex tactical warfare where survival depended on strategy as much as strength. The evidence forces us to reconsider what other dinosaur mysteries might be hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right forensic analysis to reveal their secrets buried in ancient bone and armor.